Okay, let's start it here. Good morning. My name is John Von Paris, and I am the chairman of the MDTA Finance and Administration Committee. I hereby call the meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee to order at 9 a.m. In accordance with live streaming law, this meeting is being conducted via video conference and is being live streamed on the MDTA Finance and Administration Committee webpage. All members will have their video active during the entirety of the meeting. To maintain background noise during the call, I would ask that everyone on the line please mute your phones except when speaking. I ask that those who are presenting or answering a question to please turn your video and audio on when speaking. When you're done, please turn your video off and put your audio on mute. There are no members of the public, no elected officials, and no media who have pre-registered to comment at this morning's meeting. This time we will begin with agenda item number 1, the approval of the minutes from December 5th, 2024. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Member Rosen.
Thank you, Member Rosen. Is there a second?
Member Ardinger, I'll second.
Thank you, Member Ardinger. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Thank you. Item number 2 is an update, independent auditors report fiscal year 2024 of the financial statements. And Alan, I believe, will be representing today with the report. And we have, is Deb, are you, yeah. Deb is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Member Von Paris, this is Deb Sharpless.
Yes.
So I'll do a very quick introduction of this item and then turn it over to Sean Walker. This is our annual financial statement audit. It's for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024. Our auditors are Clifton Larson Allen, and with us today is Sean Walker, a principal at CLA that was responsible for our audit. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sean to discuss the statements with you.
And I just want to apologize for that. I didn't see you on the call, so I thought Alan was doing it. So I apologize for that, and I welcome you, Sean. Thank you.
Thank you. Deb. So you are provided with a PowerPoint that was distributed to you. I'm just going to go through that as the basis of our discussion. I'm here to give you the results of the audit. Our agenda really is just a quick overview of the audit. We're going to talk about internal control deficiencies, which we didn't have any, but just to cover off on that, some required auditor communications, and we'll take it from there. So just real key players, I want to thank the staff at MDTA, Deb, Chantel, Alan, Ken, and Vicky. There's and among others in their staff, it takes a lot to put together all the numbers for an audit and interaction with our team, and we do appreciate it. They did a great job. I'm going to hit on one particular area where they did a really great job. And then myself as a principal, and Josh was our lead that did a lot of the detail work. But with that, the overview. So our areas of emphasis, the areas in which we spend more time on as we dig into the audit is around the investments, capital assets near leases, long-term debt, revenue, which is, obviously your tolling activity, intergovernmental agency relationships, and then also financial reporting. And then this year we had the key bridge transactions. And this is where I wanted to just highlight how fantastic and professional the finance staff was as soon as we keep track of all that and move things along and get to the right answer. We adopted a standard today. I'll hit on that. It was an early adoption of a GASB to deal with this particular issue, because that GASB allowed us to have flexible financial reporting around having a good way of reporting this particular activity. And I'll hit on that a little bit. Status for us, we are in the position to issue our unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of opinion that we actually put on financial statements in an assurance situation, which basically says that the financial statements that will be presented are free of material error, and that they are complete with the disclosures. As far as internal controls, we did not have any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies to report to you. The internal controls are in good shape. We didn't have any evidence that there are deficiencies of internal control. As far as our governance communication, some of the significant accounting policies or your significant accounting policies are consistent with prior year, and they're disclosed in the first note of the financial statement. We did adopt GASB number 103, as I said a little bit earlier. That's financial reporting model improvements. And the one that we were able to adopt early is that there's always been this thing in the industry about unusual or infrequent type transactions, and they had to meet certain criteria to hit that. And then there's a lot of assessment as to, like, how many times does that happen? Is it likely it could happen again? A lot of that has been whisked away in this particular rule, and allowed us to account for the key bridge as an unusual type transaction. And that management used a consulting accountant to help with all the tracking and reporting around that particular area, and it was done very well. Accounting estimates, we always bring these to your attention because your financial statements do require that estimates have to be made. And we look at those estimates, we look at the basis of management's estimates, and we determine that they're aligned with current professional standards, and are consistent with the way that people prepare these estimates. And then there's 4 estimates that we list. There's allowance for your receivables. So basically your accounts receivable, if there's an allowance for any bad debts or et cetera, that's usually based on a historical look back provision. And then also pollution remediation liabilities that are calculated by management through estimates of engineers. And then we got the capital asset depreciation, which is life of an asset. Obviously, there's a little bit of an estimate that's involved with that. And then some of the larger ones are your pension liabilities that are actually determined by an actuary through inputs from management. So we look at all those and make sure that we believe that they are stated fairly. We didn't have any difficulties encountered in performing the audit. As far as uncorrected misstatements, we had none. We did not have any that we passed on. With corrected misstatements, we didn't have any of those either. The financial statements were provided, and we didn't have to suggest any journal entries. We didn't have any disagreements with management. We did not consult with any other accountants prior to being engaged to do this work. Significant issues discussed with manager prior to retention. We didn't really have any. We did have early conversations about the key bridge, and we were in dialogue with that, as obviously that created an accounting, a fairly large accounting transaction that's in the financial statements. And then we did get a representation letter from management. So that's what I have to report. And I'll stand for any questions of the committee.
Hands raised. So, Sean, thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Report, and appreciate all the work you do for MDTA. And I think your comments about the staff and the team are right on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to the next item, number 3. And that will be an update on non-recourse financings and loans. Annual update on outstanding non-recourse debt filings, financials, financings, and MDTA loans to other TBUs. So Alan and y'all are here. We also have 2 guests, I believe, from MAA. Is that correct?
I believe Dan is on, and I'm not sure if Tanya has been able to join us, but I'm sure Dan can cover it.
Okay, good. Welcome to everyone. Welcome, Dan. And you were Deputy Chief of Airport Finance at MAA. Is that right?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Yep, and I'm driving in right now, so sorry I can't turn my camera on, but yep, I'm here and I can answer any questions that y'all have on the some of the debt you guys support us.
Great, thank you. So
Okay.
this item is to provide an update on contracts and project improvements at BWI Airport. That's the primary purpose for the annual agenda item. And then we also take the opportunity to update the Finance Committee on other non-recourse financings or conduit financings. The two most important points are that these non-recourse financings are issued under separate trusts, and the funds are not commingled in any way with the MDTA's toll revenue backed financings. The passenger facility charge improvement account funds on hand and projected net revenues are sufficient to meet their near-term capital expenditure needs. And also the same is true for the consolidated rental car facility. That separate improvement fund is projected to be sufficient along with their ongoing revenues to meet their near-term capital spending needs. The original PFC financing agreement and also the consolidated rental car facility agreement, both of those financing agreements required the MDTA board to approve all contracts, and that was their capital improvement projects. And that was prior to their submission to the Board of Public Works. That authority was delegated by resolution in 2014 to the executive director to approve those contracts. And with that resolution, we were required to come back to the board and provide these annual updates. One other financing worth mentioning is that the MDTA financed or made a loan to MAA for $20 million, and that loan, along with other loans, was authorized in 2018, but they only ultimately borrowed $20 million, so I'll provide an update on that as well. The table on page 2 provides a summary of the non-recourse financings. You can see the rental car facility is the first financing noted in that table. The par outstanding currently is about $55 million, and that was originally a $117 million issue. And then there's a series of 4 passenger facility charge backed financings. Those are under a separate trust. And then the last financing on there is a Calvert Street parking garage, and I'll provide some details about that, and the remaining outstanding is relatively small. The first financing is the BWI Consolidated Rental Car Facility. Those bonds were originally issued in 2002 to finance that facility construction. The pledged revenues for this trust are derived from a $5.75 per rental car transaction fee, and that's how the facility improvements are funded from those pledged revenues. This rental car rate was recently raised from $3.75 in January of 24, and that was the first increase since 2008. And as you may have recalled, the debt service coverage was falling, particularly during the pandemic, and there's been a shift of drivers or rental car transactions over to ride-hail services. So that's diminished their rental car transactions to some extent. We normally think of them as correlated to employments at the airport, but there's been some breakdown in that correlation in recent years. Based on MAA's forecast, their rental car revenues are expected to be sufficient to pay debt service this year. Debt service coverage is projected to be comfortably above the rate covenant of 1.25 times, so they're estimating 1.5 times coverage. As an additional measure of financial flexibility, the money's in the facility improvement account, and there's also a separate coverage fund. They're about $18 million, and that represents about 2 times annual debt service. Moving on to the passenger facility charge backed revenue bonds, We issued a series of bonds in 2012, 14, and 19. That was about 335 million. The remaining outstanding is about 165 now. Those bonds are backed by a PFC charge or an emplainment fee of $4.50 per passenger. And like the rental car facility, the facility improvements are paid by those pledged revenues. Debt service coverage in fiscal 24 was 1.7 times. The airport is projecting coverage of 1.8 times for fiscal 25. One other thing to note about the PFC bonds and all of our financings is that we have to adhere to certain IRS rules and requirements, and one of them is to conduct an arbitrage test. And that's essentially to make sure when you're doing a tax-exempt financing that you don't invest those bond proceeds and earn above your borrowing rate. And so we had to conduct a 5-year anniversary test on the 2019 bonds in 2024, and the arbitrage calculation came in slightly below the bond yield, so we were not required to rebate any funds to the IRS. The Calvert Street parking garage is an employee parking garage that the MDTA financed. It's a state employee parking garage in Annapolis. That was about a $24 million financing. This works a little bit differently than the two BWI financings in that debt service is funded through state appropriations. So we don't have a lot of funds on hand associated with that trust. We just bill Department of General Services twice a year for the semi-annual debt service. And then finally, the $20 million loan to MAA that was to finance Concourse A improvements that was executed back in 2020. Principal and interest payments from the airport began in 2021, and there's a make-whole financing agreement. So that would, back when rates were much lower and our financing costs were lower, that was set at 1.5%, and the debt service is essentially paid through 2033. The last few pages are project tables that just outline the projects that are underway that are backed by those PFC and CFC charges. And Dan is typically here, someone from the airport, to answer any questions or talk about employment levels from anyone on the finance committee. So I would open it up to questions or open it up to Dan if he wanted to interject anything first.
Well, I'm here as well, Alan and
Oh,
Dan.
great, then.
Sorry, I jumped on a little late. So first of all, Happy New Year, everyone. We had a wonderful holiday. Traffic did well. In fiscal year 24, we were almost double-digit growth on employments, about 9.9%. We're not expecting that. We're still expecting growth in fiscal year 25, roughly around 2%. We saw calendar year 24 increase overall, and we have preliminary December numbers, are not final yet, right in line with what forecasted projection of 2%. We're seeing a little bit change in our passenger traffic during the first 5 months of the fiscal year, where our O&D traffic, which at origin and destination, was down year over year compared to last year. We use TSA counts to closely monitor that, but December rebounded. We saw that increase 4% over last year. Had a lot to do with the holiday and an election year, but we're not expecting any major impacts. But overall, revenues are healthy. We had several rate increases, as Alan mentioned, the CFC. We also increased many revenue streams, such as parking and some terminal fees to our airline partners. But we are expecting overall 2% increase for employments for the fiscal year. Dan, did you want to add anything?
No, I think you did well. I was just going to talk about the CFC side if you guys are interested. Transaction days are pretty flat year over year right now, so we're seeing stable market there. And our CFC revenues obviously are up quite a bit as a result of the fee increase that Alan talked about. Strong.
Okay. Anything else to report?
Member Ron Paris, I have a question.
Okay.
For the PFC issuances, so I know, so whereas on the for the car facility we have a reserve, is there an equivalent reserve for the facility, for the passenger facility charges, or is that just all based on and supported by the charges, the passenger charges, and is there not a reserve, just sufficient cash flow to meet the needs of those issuances?
Yeah, I'll address that one. Yeah, we, I didn't mention that in as much detail because the coverage is so high, but the flow of funds for the PFCs is that the money's coming into a revenue account and funds are set aside for debt service, and everything remaining essentially flows to an improvement account. And so the improvement account is available to pay debt service in the event that revenues aren't sufficient. And there's also a debt service reserve. So there are monies there that support, debt service in that event. I think the last item there, the improvement account held 58 million. And I think we were looking at that at the end of December. So that's, substantial balance and well above the annual debt service. So what MAA provides is their projected revenues for the year, and as well as they have that ability to spend down portions of that balance. So that essentially drives future financing needs as they deplete that balance that would generate future financing needs. Essentially, the MDTA would be required to help them finance additional facility improvements that exceed those pledged revenues.
Right. So do we anticipate additional financings beyond these four for the facility charges?
I think Tom can probably answer that question. It's inevitable, but Tanya, do you have a sense of the timing?
Probably in fiscal year 26. We've been fortunate with the last 4 PFC applications, 13, 14, 15, and now 16. They've been PAYGO funded. We had very strong balances. A lot of it was due to we were able to pay back a $100 million loan to MDOT using federal funds. So that had an influx of revenues not an influx of revenues, but was able for us to manage those accounts, defease the 2012 Cs, do some PAYGO PFC applications. And we've had more PFC applications in the last year or two than we've had before. So we've also got a nice strong program. So we're anticipating some type, I would say in spring of fiscal year 26, where we would possibly be looking at a debt issuance. And I'm sorry, I don't have the number off the top of my head. Dan, do you have it? I might have it here. Hold on one second. It's about 50 million.
It'll be a small issuance. It's about 50 million, and it 27. One of our debts falls off, the 2012 Bs, which opens up the capacity to issue additional debt. So it's just going to kind of backfill some existing debt that falls off. So it's not like new debt added. It will just replace existing debt that's kind of fallen.
Yes.
Great, thank
And
you.
then 2 years behind that, the 2012 As mature as well.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Member Ron Paris, I have a question.
Sure.
Tanya, I think you mentioned federal funds being used to retire some debt to MDOT. I read, I think yesterday, that there may be some federal funds coming for airport modernization. Would that be an opportunity to also retire debt, or is there an assumption that that has to be used for future funding of projects, or not? I don't understand how that might work, but just want some perspective on that maybe.
So those were the money I referred to, the 100 million, that was COVID relief funds. We
Right.
still are working under the I have a feeling that you're referring to the build money, which is the bipartisan infrastructure money, which is either ATP, which we call Airport Terminal Program, which is a competitive program, and then we get entitlement under AIG, Airport Improvement Grants. At the end of the 5-year program, any unspent money by airports will kind of go back out in the pot, and we can compete again. I don't think they've actually said that they're going to allocate it as entitlement, but it should be mostly competitive. But Dan handles our grant program, and I know we're in fiscal year 25, going into fiscal year 26, the last round of grants, and then the first set, what they call is the clawback money. The first 200 million will go for environmental projects, and then the rest of it, I think the next tranche would be for federal contract tower with Fort Martin State Airport. We've been going after that aggressively, very hard to get. There's a lot of federal contract towers, but we did receive ATP money, which is airport terminal planning money, airport terminal grant money for the tower up there, different bucket. So that's what I believe you're referring to. But Dan, have you heard any other additional monies coming out of Bill or?
No, I have not. Any of that federal money would be used for future. It's only eligible for project costs that are in the future, so it wouldn't be used to defease any debt or anything like that.
Thank you both.
Hopefully eliminate us from issuing more debt, right?
Yeah, I guess it would free up some of the PFC side, and we would maybe not have to use as much PFC funds if we have more federal. So I guess it would prevent us from issuing new debt yet, potentially.
Okay, Member Auditor?
Thank you. Alan, I think this might be more for you. Can we shift to the Calvert Street and the MAA loan? And just for my own understanding, on the Calvert Street, this debt service, I know it's funded through state appropriations. Is there some type of agreement where this can't be negotiated to a lower repayment plan, or how?
Yeah, like our other financings, there was a financing agreement, and so it has very strict requirements. We have to bill Department of General Services twice a year. They have to pay us so many days before that semi-annual payments due to the trustee, which is Bank of New York Mellon, and then those funds are paid out to bondholders. So it's fairly rigid requirements. The amortization schedule was set, at the time of issuance, and there's no flexibility whatsoever in any of those payment terms. And that state appropriation is required under law as well.
Okay, so can't be part of any budget discussions as to reduction or anything.
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know if anybody from legal is on, but that is not my understanding, and there's never been any interruption or discussion in all my time here associated with any change in that debt service.
Okay, great. MAA loan, boy, 1.53% sounds really good right now.
Right.
Very good.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that? As how that impacts our repayment?
And so we're careful, when we have negotiated these financing arrangements with other entities, is we've looked at our cost of capital, MDTAs at the time, and tried to come up with what we would term as a make-whole financing rate. So to not disadvantage the MDTA in any way and make this fair assessment, so we wouldn't want to overcharge. And so what we did at the time, and my memory's fading a bit, is that we were looking at, well, what's our financing rate now? We're somewhat frequently in the capital markets and borrowing, and at any time we can assess what our financing rate would be. And so I think we were looking at the time at near-term financings, and that's what helped inform that financing rate. And so I fully believe that was a fair and a make whole for the MDTA. And it looks like Deb jumped on, so she'd like to say something as well.
Yeah, Alan, you used the weighted average, weighted average. All of a sudden, it's slipping my mind.
I think we were looking at like our cost of capital. Yeah, the C for cost of capital, and we also looked at the amortization term. Yeah, our term, right.
So it's since our program is funded with both debt and PAYGO, it's a weighted average of, pardon me, our borrowing costs as well as our investment returns, and that's what we use in order to create a break even for us.
Great. All right. Thank you.
I want to say too, that loan was right around pre-COVID times, and we had issued revenue bonds at the first time in 2021, and our true interest cost, our TIC was very in line with this one, very low compared to what we got, in this new issuance that we just did was 1.7, I believe, on the February 2021 bonds, and about 2% on the July 2021. And I think the MDTA loan was right around that same time, correct, Alan? 2020 or 2021?
Yeah, 2020, that's right. And as I recall, we came up with the loan agreement and we were working at setting that rate. And so we were monitoring the capital markets and our financings, and we're basically looking back at our recent financings to see what we, incurred. And that's where, our cost is essentially fixed at that point. We've locked in a financing that incorporates the use of those monies. And so, it's sort of risk-free at that point from a rate differential or basis risk differential for the MDTA, essentially borrowing versus lending rate.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, board members, for your questions. They're very good questions. And Alan, thank you for addressing them. We'll move on to the next item, number 4, an update by our Executive Director, Bruce Gardner, on the IT division consolidation. This will be a verbal
Yes.
presentation. Thank you. Hi, Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and David Goldsboro is also on the call, as well as Percy. But purpose of the update today was to bring you up to speed on an ongoing effort within MDOT and MDTA to drive some efficiencies and improvements in our delivery of IT services. So going to start back with last summer, the secretary brought all the modal administrators together. So myself and my colleagues at MDOT, SHA, and MTA, Port, et cetera, to develop an IT governance board. There's a lot of issues that the TSO has been dealing with in terms of data center updates and some repairs that were needed for the data centers. Those were initial conversations. So those have been, those improvements are underway. And cybersecurity, is an issue for all of us. We're all in one MDOT network, leading into the state network. So needed to kind of talk through some things about that and look at different performance metrics. So had some good, healthy discussions there. And then in moving into the fall in September, the secretary determined that he wanted to consolidate the MDOT IT teams and have them working more closely under the IT director. So David and his counterparts since that time have been working in what they have developed for various lanes to look at the functions of the IT departments to see how we can all kind of work more effectively together. But as a control agency, with MDOT, it's similar to the governor's IT Department of Information Technology, and really wanted to focus in on a few core things: excellent customer service, increasing efficiency, reducing waste, and being mindful of whether it's toll or taxpayer dollars to come up with kind of a new way to deliver our services. So I've got to give a lot of credit to David and his counterparts, because they have been doing a lot of work in this area. It's been mostly driven at the staff level. This wasn't a big consultant report that delivered, something of like, this is how we're going to do it. So they've been sharing with each other and with us, the relatively new director of IT at MDOT on all of their functions. So they're in the process of carving out the functions that belong kind of, in a centralized way. That'd be a help desk, function, because that service is kind of consistent throughout the department. So that's one example. And then network services would be another example of that. So they've developed kind of activity grids of responsibility and reporting relationships, and they're working on different report outs, kind of short, medium, long term, of how a consolidation would move forward. For the rest of the MDOT modes, that because they're all in one budget, they're talking about how that all those positions could be under one. And there are various challenges that each one of the modal administrations have, whether it's federal oversight from the Federal Transit Administration, or the U.S. Coast Guard for the port. And obviously for us, we have been talking with the IT folks at TSO about, what our responsibilities and specifically what your responsibilities as a board are. So what we've done is, as staff at MDTA, is prepared kind of what would be an MOU framework for these services if it was determined that some of the positions belonged as a centralized, and then we tap into those services, or if they stay with us. So all the discussions of PINs are still kind of in the works, but I wanted to prepare you for some more formal discussions, probably at future and next month Finance Committee, of a discussion of a framework for an MOU, where basically the MDOT would be providing more in the way of services to us, potentially billing back to us for some of the IT services. In an MOU, obviously, one of the biggest things that we need to account for is the fact that the tolling services that we have are our financial, lifeline. So, that is something that really needs to stay within, with your control as the MDTA board. So we're keeping all those things in mind as we move forward. But you could be seeing some discussions either in the budgets with the General Assembly about this. The MDOT positions moving around. It's not been fully determined yet. They're still kind of vetting through these things. So we will be having a town hall for our employees. David, Percy, and I participated in a town hall back in the fall at the beginning of this process. I think the two takeaways I had from that town hall was basically that people really like working for MDTA. And they have concerns when they hear about any kind of consolidation effort. So that's the good news story. And then, the other is just that change is always difficult. So we're working with staff to go through that and make sure we understand how the functions would operate in the future. So it's an ongoing process, and we are, just a few examples of the things that we're specifically have to look at. There's about, David, I think we were at 8, but we're at 9, different areas of discussion. So that's infrastructure. Second is architecture, software. Third would be just data migration and software. Fourth, system integrations. Next, cybersecurity and compliance. And then you get to service desk integration, help desk integration, and then just operational transitions and HR, functions. So as you can hear from just all those different lanes that the different David and his counterparts are leading these discussions, there's a lot of thought going into it right now, but it still was a little too fluid to kind of give you a formal outline of like what this means for us. But we will be coming back to you February, March timeframe, and with materials for you to potentially act on to help facilitate this process. So that's a very high level overview of some of the activities that been undertaken, and we'll certainly report back how the next town halls go with our employees and the MDOT representatives. So that's all I had to present today, and I'm open to questions, and David and Percy are here to help as well.
Thank you. I do have one question real quick on, I guess, overall, how are our employees feeling about this? You touched on it a little bit, but how are they feeling about this?
I mean, I think for the longer term employees, they've gone through different discussions of major efforts, and they're just want to make sure that this is done in the right way. I'd say that many of them have helped David lean into this to help make it happen. So that's a good thing. But David, do you want to give your impression? You're working very closely with everybody, and David actually attended a meeting over at one of the other agencies earlier this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, Member Von Paris and to the rest of the board. Great to see everyone. Yeah, I think initially folks were a little bit nervous. We've consolidation has been talked about in previous administrations, and I think for one reason or another, it kind of stalled out. So I think that folks have ideas for how they think things could work. And really function well in an enterprise way, consolidated way. So I think people are excited at the opportunity, but definitely I agree with Bruce. It's just change is difficult, and I think folks want to just understand what the plan is. And sometimes it's it's hard to keep people in the current. They want to look down the road 6 months and know what's happening 6 months down the road, and sometimes we just don't have those answers. And so it's just more or less, just stay focused on the work. That's the most important thing. And as we have opportunities arise, let's just be ready to participate in those conversations and make sure that MDTA is represented. And so I think for the most part, people are looking forward to having input and being able to set a direction and set some standards and things like that that could really benefit the enterprise as a whole. I think there's a lot of things that we've been wanting to do, to help the enterprise, and this probably would be an opportunity to do that.
Thanks. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, I don't see any hands up, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Von Paris.
Thank you, and David and Percy and Bruce, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lot going on. Okay, well, we have gone through everything on the agenda, and we get to the point where we need a vote to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Member Carroll.
Okay, thank you, Member Carroll. Is there a second?
Member Ardinger, I'll second.
Thank you, Member Ardinger. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.